Hello, my friends from Mexico City. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, hello.
Hello, hello. And today,
Absolutely.
yes, it's really fun. I just had to review the computer while you were watching the dancing bear, but apparently everything is working fine. And I'm super excited to have today Samartha, Chandrashekar, and Tomas Sobotik. On one hand, Samartha is a Snowflake PM in charge of everything compute, and we have Tomas Sobotik, a Snowflake expert and customer to be the voice of the customers. Where are you today, Samartha?
I am in Bellevue, Washington.
Bellevue, Washington. Nice. And how about Thomas?
I am in Czech Republic.
In the Czech Republic. How late is it in the Czech Republic?
It's 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Nice. So everything is working, and this is the first time that Samartha and Thomas meet. We just met like 20 minutes ago. So just to do our intros, Thomas, can you tell a little bit about you to Samartha and the same Samartha to Thomas?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go first. Hello, I'm Tomas Sobotik. I work as lead data engineer and architect at a company called Tieto. Tieto is Finnish IT provider providing mainly IT services at Nordics market in Europe. And obviously, I'm part of the data management unit, helping our customers with their cloudification journeys, and especially with their moving into Snowflake. Apart from that, I'm also a member of a great Snowflake community. I'm Snowflake Super Data Hero, and I'm also helping your certification team. So I'm Snowflake subject matter expert. And last but not least, I'm also instructor, and I'm leading my own Snowflake courses at various platforms.
That's awesome. You're an expert. You're a customer. You're a teacher. You write. I'm going to show some of your posts. And how about you, Samartha?
I am a Snowflake employee. I work in Snowflake's product management organization. I'm responsible for all things compute, as well as most recently cost governance and workload optimization. So excited to be here again on this show and talk to all of our viewers about this along with Thomas.
Yes, and I want to show a little bit of the work that both of you have done. Let me find my tab. It's all a little funky while I'm trying to fix my computer, but it's working. How about the world? Who do we have with us today live? Is this stream working? Say hi, say where you are. I love seeing all of our audience be part of this. But as I was telling you, this is not the first time that Samartha is in our lives. We had him talking about cost optimizations 2 months ago. He also showed off a lot of interesting uh, announcements from Summit. And today we're going to focus on going to zero. But we have this a huge series of not only doing these lives now weekly and talking about Snowflake topics, we love talking about cost optimization. And both of our guests today are an expert on that. See the previous episodes to see the announcement that we have at Summit straight from Samartha. Uh, with Scott, we reviewed how he optimizes with customers. We referenced his session at Summit with Instacart. That was a beautiful session. And of course, today we're going to go talk about scaling to zero. And in terms of blog posts that Tomas has written, uh, he's an expert. He's written about Snowflake cost management. He has written about cost optimizations. There is the part one and part two. You can read all about it online. But let's get straight to our topic. How about we start with Samartha? What do you have for us today on the theme scaling to zero?
Yeah, today is all about scale to zero. At Snowflake, we're deeply committed to ensure that customers get the best bang for the buck for their Snowflake spend. And a key part of making that happen essentially is to only pay for your resources when it's being put to active use by useful work. And when it's not being put to use with useful work, we want to scale to zero to ensure that you don't have to pay for it. A great example here is our virtual warehouses, which is the primary compute abstraction at Snowflake, and it also represents compute capacity. These virtual warehouses come in various t-shirt sizes, and the expectation to use Snowflake is that you have to provision these a priori and then route work, jobs, or queries in SQL, Python, Java, JavaScript, Scala, etc. Now, it's fine if sort of these compute artifacts are receiving useful work and are getting saturated and are doing that useful work. However, let's say you have a bursty workload and there is a duration of time for which there is no incoming work that happens. There is no work. So in such cases, it would be wasteful to have that compute capacity running and to keep paying for it. And that's where scale to zero comes in, which essentially says that if there is no useful work, we can go to zero, which is there is no compute that's running, and you as the customer are not paying for anything. Now, the key part is if new work does come in, then we have the ability to instantly or near instantly scale back up to be able to support hundreds and thousands of queries near instantly. And we do a lot of work behind the scenes to achieve this, which is the ability to go to zero near instantly and the ability to elastically scale up again near instantly to be able to handle a large deluge of work that might come in. So that is the foundational capability we're going to talk about, deep dive into, but that's the high level picture.
I love it. And you have demos for us today. I would love to see this working. By the way, we don't have our usual chatter today because somehow LinkedIn failed. So we have friends on YouTube Live right now. Hopefully, they are all moving to the YouTube link right now so they can talk to us while we're doing this. But it's all recorded, so people are going to watch this regardless. Um, so, what demos did you prepare for us?
Certainly. So I'll show you maybe two or three demos. The first one is essentially around this capability that's called auto suspend and auto resume. So scale to zero, of course, is the umbrella term that alludes to the behavior, but the specific Snowflake capabilities are called auto suspend and auto resume. So virtual warehouse, our primary compute abstraction, which is a unit of capacity, has this property called auto suspend enabled by default. You can, of course, choose to override it. And then there's also another property called auto resume. Auto suspend means that when there is no work coming in, the warehouse goes to sleep, aka scales down to zero. Auto resume means that when new work comes in, it instantly scales back up, and starts executing that work. Now, one of the recommendations that we have is to not disable this auto suspend property, and also auto resume. So one of the demos that I have here is a simplistic one. Let me share my screen quickly to show you this in action. So what I have here is a query that it's pretty simplistic. All that it identifies is the list of warehouses with auto suspend disabled. Um, and in this test account, it so happens that, well, there are no such warehouses. Now let's look at to see if there are warehouses with auto resume disabled. Um, Showing up. Looks like everything's good, so no problem. Now, there is another important point here that I'd like to show you. Now, these two are pretty low hanging fruits. Most customers have this setup, or won't have tweaked around with auto suspend and auto resume things. But another very important part here that I'd like to draw attention to is something that's called the auto suspend timeout. Now, you get to stipulate or you get to control the duration for which a warehouse will stay running until after it stops receiving work. And the important consideration here is essentially caching. So we do a lot of work behind the scenes to ensure that both intermediate results as well as persistent files that are accessed by your workload, which are stored in object storage S3 on AWS, are cached in this intermediate storage layer. Now, if you think of a virtual warehouse, it is essentially a collection of VMs in a network mesh. And each of these VMs have two important parts. One is main memory, a lot of RAM, and secondary storage, which is local SSD. So we use the VM SKUs that actually have local SSD as opposed to using, say, remote block storage like EBS. Now, Using these two memory artifacts, we have constructed our own ephemeral caching layer that caches, again, intermediate results, intermediate data, as well as sort of the persistent files that are accessed. And we, especially for the persistent files, we have a sort of an LRU based eviction mechanism, and we lazily, using a consistent hashing mechanism, hash these persistent files that represent your data onto individual VMs. Now, the key part here to be mindful of is when a warehouse is suspended, by virtue of it scaling down to zero, the caches associated with these compute artifacts also get invalidated. So it's important to note that there is this important balance between suspending immediately, where you're not paying for any compute that you're not actively using, and also taking the benefit of caching, which has been proven to be extremely efficacious, at least in Snowflake. So there are two ends of the spectrum based on the kind of workload you have. On one end, if you have BI workloads or dashboarding style workloads, which are typically big beneficiaries of caching, then we recommend the default value for auto suspend timeout, which is 10 minutes. On the contrary, on the other end of the spectrum is ELT or ETL type of workloads where the benefit of caching is somewhat moot. And in those cases, we almost recommend suspending immediately, because there is no net benefit to have the compute running for longer than absolutely needed. And then, of course, you could have workloads that are somewhere in between the spectrum, sort of data science workloads, sort of other forms of data pipelines, etc., where that might be able to, in some moderate ways, take advantage of the caching itself. And there we recommend some trial and error mechanisms to find your sweet spot, but it's typically, in most of our experience, between 3 and 5 minutes of auto suspend duration. Now, an anti pattern here that is worth noting is that there could be cases where your auto suspend timeout is set to some sort of an egregiously high value, and it is useful to scan your accounts to identify this. And so this query that I'm showing you here, essentially what it does is it goes and flags that. In this case, I've said 3600 seconds, which is an hour, is what I consider, for the purposes of this demo, an egregiously high value for auto suspend, which means that even after there is no work coming in, the warehouse is kept running for an hour before it goes to sleep. And for most cases, this is, again, too high. So what this query does is it will flag um, warehouses where this is the case, where auto suspend values are egregiously high. And so it looks like this account does have such warehouses, although this account involved everyone using it setting auto suspend. The auto suspend timeouts itself have not been um, set in an optimal manner, and this is something to flag, and some useful forcing function or a useful launching point to go follow up with the respective owners to go fix this.
Yep, I
This
see
is
a test for extra large with an auto suspend of an hour. That seems a little wasteful,
that
but
is
at
true.
least you're able to detect it.
That is true. And so, yeah, you know, we
How do you feel
recommend. I
when you
mean,
see
if you
that,
have
Tomas?
optimization dashboards, queries like this can flag things like that. So I'll
Yes.
pause there to see if there are other thoughts or questions before getting back to this.
Yes, we don't have today our usual friends on LinkedIn because that went down. But Tomas, you can be the voice of the user right now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I must say that yeah, it was great points from Samartha, because it shows also my like way of working when I start new projects around Snowflake, and start the discussion with customers, explaining that because especially for the folks who are used to work in some on-prem solutions, now when they are moving into Snowflake with all those like virtual warehouses which are scalable and elastic, to show them that we have a lot of options how to set it up, and how all those parameters which Samartha showed us has impact on performance and the cost. So auto suspend and auto resume are one of them. I'm also trying to explain that okay, we have like those t-shirt sizes, we should try to find the right size for each workload. Another point I'm also trying to highlight that okay, maybe we should try to create multiple warehouses, and each warehouse should serve different like purpose. let's have a one warehouse which will be used for data ingestion, another warehouse for ELT, another warehouse for BI applications, like Samartha said. And each such use case requires different setup in terms of auto-suspend and auto-resume parameters because of the cache, for instance, and the cost. But there are other parameters which probably are important, like query timeouts. Yeah, there is some like default value, but probably you want to update it per use case because the default value is 2 days, I believe. So this also might be like some cost spike, an inefficient cost spike. So yeah, and usually the question from the customer is, okay, how we will know that we have the right warehouse size, if we should use like extra small or medium or large. And I'm always saying, okay, we will just take a couple of like usual queries and we will do some testing and we will find out. But I know that at least I've heard on Summit that there will be a new metric called, I think, warehouse utilization metric, which will help us with that. So maybe, Samartha, if you can like brief us about that or tell us more details, because at least I'm eager to know more.
Certainly. So we have in private preview, and we announced this at Summit, a new metric that's called warehouse utilization. So under account usage, there are two new views. One that shows warehouse utilization as a percentage, and another that shows the utilization of each cluster if you're using a multi-cluster warehouse, also as a percentage. And it's a single blended metric that captures sort of all aspects of resource consumption. And so it provides a very useful directional signal for right sizing. If your warehouse is 20% used or 70% used or 80% used, it in conjunction with other metrics that we have, like load metrics. I think the most important part of that load metric is the queuing metric. You look at utilization of your warehouses, individual clusters, and the level of queuing, and that can provide a good launching point to some pretty obvious low hanging fruit optimizations towards right sizing. And yes, so that metric we think is going to be massively impactful, especially as it rolls out more broadly for the purposes of right sizing compute and to ensure that you're not over provisioning compute. The other segue here that I think is important to call out is we also have this construct called resource monitors. And with resource monitors, we have a mechanism to essentially put a hard limit on the number of credits consumed by a warehouse. Now, if you squint and look at it, the warehouse size and warehouse properties like number of clusters in a warehouse, the auto scaling policy, standard or economy, these things themselves provide implicit cost controls and some form of a mechanism for pacing, which effectively controls your burn rate of spend. In addition, we have this layer called resource monitors, where you can say that if a certain threshold number of credits is breached, then perform these actions. And the two actions that we support are either notify, where you get notified and then you can take downstream action, or we can actually go ahead and auto-suspend or suspend a warehouse in response to a certain limit getting breached. And this is also a powerful capability to control spend, where you can articulate hard limits, also behaviors like sort of suspend only, notify only, or suspend and notify, etc. And one of our best practices is also to use resource monitors on all of your warehouses. You might not want to go as far as suspending your warehouses. There are some cases where that could be tantamount to an outage, so we recommend the judicious use of the suspend property. But at the very least, getting notified when certain thresholds are breached is a low hanging fruit. And it's also something that a lot of our customers use, but a lot of our customers also don't use. So in fact, that's also a good segue to talk about to show you a demo of
Yes.
essentially a query around resource monitors. So what I have here, and by the way, this is all in a blog post that shouldn't be too hard to find, that I put up recently, is where this essentially looks at warehouses with resource monitors not set, where resource monitor equals null. So if I run this in this test account, once this finishes, we'll notice that there are a very large number of accounts without any of warehouses without any resource monitor setup, which is again a forcing function to go follow up with the respective owners to drive best practice behavior. I mean, it's one thing that you don't want to auto suspend based on a certain threshold being reached, but at the very least, I think it's important to set this up, at least get notified. Um, and it's also a forcing function because you need to provide some sort of a spend limit. It also gets all parties involved into this FinOps mindset where you're using some credit consuming artifact. You need to have some idea of how much you think you'll spend, how much you want to spend, etc.
So, Tomas, as a Snowflake customer, how do you use these resource monitors?
Yeah, I must say that the resource monitors are a really great feature, and they can help you like prevent any unintentional cost spikes. So I would also recommend to use them wisely. And I would like to add one more thing, because I would say the resource monitors are some kind of controlling features from cost point of view. And Samartha also mentioned the dashboards, because Snowflake provides a lot of useful data in the account usage schema in the Snowflake internal database. And there is really a great resource for every company to try to build their own visibility into how they use the virtual warehouses or whatever Snowflake features. So what I'm also trying to recommend every time is, let's go take those data and build some custom-made dashboards in Snowsight. So we have all the tools, we have all the data, we just need to put some effort into it, and it will be easier next time, because we can have everything nicely visualized in nice charts, and they can help us understand how our cost is distributed over those virtual warehouses.
Yeah. So I want to ask here, because visualizing and looking at it super important, but you do that like the next day, the next week, you can see like patterns.
Yeah.
While resource monitors help you detect things that are happening right now. How do you see that balance?
Sorry, what? How?
How do you see the balance between understanding, like visualizing, and getting alerts from a resource monitor?
Yeah, I think those things relate, but of course the resource monitors should have like higher priority, because you need to be notified now. You need to like prevent any unintentional cost spending. So let's start with the resource monitor, and then add some visibility to help you understand your trends in future.
Yes, and we got a comment here. Again, we don't have our usual chatter because the LinkedIn stream failed, but we are live on YouTube. But we have Shakshu Mehta asking about the warehouse usage percentage at cluster level would be an awesome feature. What do
Yeah,
you think
so
about
this
that,
is in
Samantha?
fact in private preview, like I said.
Ooh,
Yeah, can't wait to roll this out more broadly. So as a part of these warehouse utilization metrics, not only are we showing warehouse utilization at the warehouse level, but also on a per cluster level, especially if you have multi-cluster warehouses.
beautiful.
Now,
How much do you look at that data, kind of data, Tomasz? Like,
I'm not like FinOps specialist,
mhm.
or the guy who would like have a budget on the table, but I'm trying to have a look there at least one per month to see some trends, how we are moving from month to month. If there is anything like unintentional, anything strange, which we can prevent in the future, or if it's just on the same level, then it's fine. But of course, if there someone is coming and knocking on my shoulder, we should have a look at our cost spending, then I will go and do some deep look into the account usage data.
the other thing that I will add is resource monitors can be applied at the warehouse level, but there are other credit consuming artifacts in Snowflake beyond just the warehouse. It could be a bunch of serverless services, it could be networking or data transfer costs, storage costs, etc. So we also have this new capability that's called budgets. That's going to be public preview soon. And again, we'll save sort of that topic for another session. But what I can provide is as much of a sneak peek as I can in the time that we have left of budgets. Again, I won't deep dive into it, but I'm going to share my screen again and show you sort of this capability that's in the works, where you can
Preview.
actually set a spending limit at a per account level and then get notified on that spend. And this again includes all of the resources in an account, not just warehouses that resource monitors govern, but everything else. And also, most importantly, compared to resource monitors, which upon the breach of a certain threshold that you pre-stipulate a priori will either notify you or will trigger certain downstream actions like suspending the warehouse, budgets can be more proactive based on a trajectory that it'll draw out. It will proactively, based on what your spend is looking like, if you're on course to exceed your budget threshold for the end of the month, proactively notify you as well. So again, there's much to explore here, much to talk about. I won't. We'll save that for another session. But I did want to sort of at least briefly provide a sneak peek of budgets, which is coming into public preview, hopefully in a matter of days.
I love how budgets let us look into the future, and you're showing us the future, which is budgets.
Right.
So great job projecting what's going to happen. We have 2 minutes left, and I want to know, like, well, I owe both of you a big session with all of our LinkedIn friends, but at least the ones that are on YouTube, they are happy. Mr. Nivanti Patil is very happy to see both of you, but I would love to have you both back. Let's close in these 2 minutes, like last words where people can find you. And when you come back, what would you like to show off next? Because I love to have both of you, Thomas as a customer, Samartha from the PM side. Thomas first.
Okay, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tomas Sobotik there, or I have a Medium account where I'm trying to share all my Snowflake experience. A lot of those posts are also part of the Snowflake Snowflake Medium, so you can have a look. I'm always trying to provide my, like, not best practices, but my own view how I'm deliver around Snowflake. And what I would like to talk about more next time, I'm really looking forward to have my hands dirty with all those new cost optimization features. So I'm really looking forward to see the budgets, warehouse utilization metrics, but also others which you have mentioned in your summit session. So yeah.
Perfect. That's a challenge for Samartha. Let's get this on Thomas' hands. And let me highlight. Jack says, really helpful resources and awesome team here. Thanks for all the shared insights. So Samartha, today you gave us 3 demos, and it's not only the feature that allows you to see that we have scaled down to 0, but also I love how you showed us that we can research if those features are turned on at a decent, like at a level that makes sense. So last words, what would you like to show us next, and what should we remember from this session?
Certainly. I'd say 3 points. Number one, we have an elaborate roadmap of functionality ahead of us to help customers optimize spend and ensure that they're getting the best bang for their buck for all of their spend on Snowflake. Second, in terms of what's next, maybe we can have another session, get into budget and deep dive into that, and talk about all of the capabilities, all of the possibilities, not just right now, but where things are trending towards as well. And then lastly, I will re-emphasize sort of the topics that we covered, which is scale to 0 and resource monitors. These are among the most impactful capabilities that you can use to optimize your cost. Scale to 0 because you only pay for what you use, in the most literal sense, and not for capacity that is provisioned, that is not being put to useful work. And resource monitors because you can actually you can set hard limits and suspend warehouses. It's a powerful capability. There's this great line: with great power comes great responsibility. But because it can be seen as tantamount to an outage, but you can actually go do that, which is that if a certain threshold is breached in terms of spend, you can actually suspend the warehouse itself, and thus it is a very powerful capability. There are a few questions, Felipe. Maybe we can quickly attempt to answer them as well that I'm seeing coming in.
Do you have fast answers?
Yeah, I have quick answers. So
Excellent.
first one is resource monitors and Snowpark optimized warehouses. Yes, it's supported. We also recommend Snowpark optimized warehouses for greater caches in the larger memory, larger amounts of local SSD. It can not just unlock new use cases, but also if your workload can benefit from caches, then Snowpark Optimized is great. And yes, you can set resource monitors. There is
Thank
also
you,
another
Murali, for the
question that says,
question.
yeah, Snowflake maintains cache tied to each virtual machine or warehouse, and when VM is suspended, cache gets cleared. Is there a method to suspend a VM and reattach cache? So the short answer is no. You get to control the warehouse lifecycle, not the constituent parts of the warehouse, the virtual machines that back it behind the scenes. Those abstractions are not exposed. There is also no way to sort of isolate the cache from the compute. Maybe in one of the other sessions, we'll get into the architecture of how things work behind the scenes that should help clarify this.
Because I understand Snowflake does a best effort to bring the same machine to when it reactivates.
Correct. What I will say though is we've done a lot of work to ensure that the caching works great to the point where although the size of the cache is less than 0.1% of the size of the persistent storage like S3 that you typically have, we have roughly about 80% cache hit rates for read-only queries and about 60% for read-write queries. What we've also done is we have gone ahead and actually shared the data sets from a certain period of time. We've scrubbed, of course, all PII data here and stuff like that, but this is real Snowflake data that we use to benchmark our the efficacy of any caching improvements. You can also go explore this. We put this all up on GitHub. You can download that data, but this is data pertaining to about 70 million queries from all Snowflake customers over this period of time that's stipulated here. So
Yes. And what's the link to find that data
why
set?
don't I drop that in the
Perfect.
chat here,
Drop it
and
in the
maybe
chat.
it
Excellent.
can be.
And because I'm going to share it on the YouTube chat, and uh, because we are sharing all these goods as the show ends, I have a last question then. How much time it takes to boot up a warehouse from suspended state, latency? I'm sure Tomas has a lot of experience with this, and Samartha has the Snowflake answer.
Okay, I have a user-based answer, and I would say it's instantaneous operation. So at least for majority of the warehouses, it's just like that, I would say. Of course, if you need like 4x large and higher, I can imagine it will take like more time. But for those sizes which I use usually, it's really just a matter of milliseconds, maybe.
I
I will
love
attest
how
to that.
Tomas, this is reflecting the user experience.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, the demos that I just showed you were from a suspended warehouse. So as I hit run, the warehouse came back up and started running your queries. Now, again, the other thing that I will point out is we take this very seriously to the point where we have an SLO dashboard internally, and all of our engineers on the warehouse team carry pagers in the sense that if we breach that SLO on aggregate, where the P99 falls below a certain threshold, that actually pages an on-call engineer saying, hey, look at it. So that's the level of investment that we have to ensure that these warehouse lifecycle operations start up, suspend, resume from suspend, scale out if you're adding more clusters, etc., are as instantaneous as possible. Yes, I mean, like Thomas mentioned, it is to some extent a function of warehouse size and also what cloud provider you're on. It's typically the snappiest on AWS in our experience, and also the smaller ones are like extremely fast. Most cases less than a second. So
So yes, we wanted to look like magic, but we have a big team working really, really hard to make the magic happen. And that's why people love Snowflake. It feels really, really magic for them. And with that, thank you very much, everyone that showed up, everyone that's watching the recording. Watch the other videos in this series. Next time we will be fully linked in. We have a lot of interesting topics. And now it's my time to tell the bird to dance us off. Thanks, Tomas and Samartha. Have a great day or night.